Joining me now from Beijing is Deng Liangchun. He is policy manager of the Climate and Energy Program with the World Wildlife Fund China, and he works on international climate negotiation. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much. You were in Lima. First of all, give me your reaction to the last-minute deal reached in Peru, and will it make a difference?
So first of all, I think the joint statement between China and the U.S. before the COP Lima discussion is a very significant announcement between these two countries, while it also sends a signal to international communities, to other negotiation parties, that the two largest emitters and the two politically important countries are taking leadership on this joint efforts to address emission reductions. And this could also send a very strong signals to other countries to follow, so that countries can have their joint climate contributions together, so as to reach the target of the UNFCCC discussion. So I think first of all, this joint statement between China and the US is very important.
Obviously, yes, the backdrop of the China-US deal, where China set a date for topping its emissions, the US ambitious targets to reduce, helped create a climate for climate change talks in Lima. But we just talked to guests who are a little bit worried that there wasn't the commitment given at Lima that could follow through to the big climate deal conference in Paris next year, where people will actually sign on for their nations to reduce emissions enough to tackle global warming. What's your reaction to that?
I think definitely things needs to be improved, and the current targets, I mean, from China and also from the U.S., which China says that it intends to peak its national carbon emissions around 2030 with an energy share of 20% coming from non-fossil fuels, but also around 2030, while the United States has a target of reducing its emissions about 26 to 28% by 2025. And these actions, they are very initial signals, and they are initial proposals coming from both countries. And we think that in order to reach this 2-degree target, both countries probably they need to do more instead of their current proposals. So for the years to come, for the upcoming few months, I think China is able to propose some other package proposals on the table. Things like enhanced intensity targets towards even 2025 and also towards 2030, while with another forest stock targets by that area, by that same sort of period. So I think there are still more things to be improved for the targets of these two countries.
You know, China is the biggest consumer of coal on the planet. That's going to grow until 2030. Do you see other alternatives like solar, hydro, of course, very important in China, making up the difference to make sure that those emission targets are kept by 2030?
I think in order for the national carbon emissions to peak around 2030, or preferably as early as possible, and this is also what China aspired to do, and the country needs to peak its total coal consumption first. And currently, WWF, together with our partners, are commissioning a research in this field, talking about that China might have these possibilities to peak its national coal consumption even before 2020, so that it gives larger shares of other cleaner renewable energies to bridge the gap of China's increasing energy demand. So if this energy transition can happen fast and at a larger scale, and we believe that there is a chance that China can peak its national carbon emissions earlier than the current proposed timeline.
That's interesting that you think that China can actually beat its targets. Other countries, the third biggest polluter, India, though, is rapidly increasing its coal consumption. It may be that it signs on to a target that actually sees coal use increase beyond 2030. Do you think, in a way, a lot of developing countries are being given a blank check because they feel they have to catch up with the developed economies?
I think if you talk about compare the situations of China and India, even though both countries are still developing countries, but the development level of these two countries are differentiated. So we're talking about there's even a differentiation among developing countries themselves. So for countries like China, its industrialization and urbanization process are much higher than that of India. I think it is a quite good position for China to talk about its national peaking timeline as already. And for countries like India, I think that they definitely need to reconsider their development, energy development path, because India, as a country with similar air pollution issues in China, they also have their domestic concerns of growing jobs, as well as to improve the health of the public, while also for the general public to live in a sound environment. And that's all valid domestic concerns for Indian government to consider more about their climate targets, as well as energy transition issues.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really important point here. At Lima, even though there's a growing realization that you have to sign on to something, there's still these national interests out there. Has the world collectively done enough to sign on, do you think, to make commitments so that the world's temperature does not increase by 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the scientific view that we have to stop the planet warming to that level by the end of the century? Or do you think that target is going to be missed under the current discussions?
I think before we get to Lima, we actually have a text which is proposed by the co-chair, and the text is already weak. And after 2 weeks of discussions, I think the texts are getting weaker and weaker. And finally, we come up with this consensus among all countries with a very lowest ambition of the current version of the final text, which we call that's Lima Call for Climate Actions. And we don't think the current negotiation momentum is enough to secure us to a 2-degree target, which is endorsed by Cancun as a way to interpret the ultimate goal of UNFCCC, so on climate change issues. So I think if the governments are not speeding up their actions, particularly to breach the emission gigaton cap before 2020, while also to establish a very strong and ambitious framework for the post-2020 climate regime, I think there is a very likelihood that we are going to miss this 2-degree target.
You know, it's funny, everyone has agreed on that point, that we're still likely to miss the target unless nations step up. Thank you so much for joining us from Beijing. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. Join us at CCTV America's Facebook page to comment on this or any show, or chat with us on Twitter at CCTV America. I'm Nathan King in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.